You're fired effective next month." I was so shocked, my eyes nearly popped out. "You embezzled the company's money." "There's no need to deny it. We have proof. The petty cash was withdrawn during your overtime hours." I was too stunned to understand President Wilson's words. "It seems there's footage of me on the security cameras, but I have no recollection of it." "Wait a minute, embezzling petty cash. I'm in the sales department, not accounting. That's impossible." I desperately protested, but President Wilson wouldn't listen. I suddenly grew to hate Sorry Corporation. When I told President Wilson I would accept the termination, his stern face turned into a wide smile. "Oh, really? That's too bad. This company's getting famous, so we wanted to avoid involving the police and handle this quietly. It's a real shame to lose such a talented person like you." Resolving to quit, I said, "It really is a pity. Well, take care," and quickly left the president's office. My name is Mike Moore, a 42-year-old man. I work as a sales manager at Sorry Corporation, a mid-sized trading company. After graduating from college, I joined this company and was assigned to the sales department. From elementary school to college, I led a very ordinary life without standing out. However, after joining the company, my talents seemed to bloom. I quickly achieved top results in the sales department and soon became the center of attention as a promising new hire. Clients spoke highly of me, praising that I provided more than they expected from all quarters. To satisfy clients, I listened carefully to their requests and provided exactly what they needed, and this approach paid off. Realizing that empathy could be a powerful tool, I continually focused on the needs of others in my sales activities. By treating my colleagues with care, the company recognized my performance. And 3 years after joining, I was promoted to supervisor, then to assistant manager 4 years later. I am now a manager and am set to be promoted to assistant director soon. My rapid promotions earned me respect from my subordinates, who looked up to me. Since I was known for my amiable nature since joining the company, even now as a manager, my subordinates treat me like a friend. I was fortunate with both the company and my relationships, and I was happy. One day, the founding president of Sorry Corporation fell ill and had to step down suddenly. The vice president's son, John Wilson, took over as the second president. Wilson was usually quiet and inscrutable, which made me uneasy about him becoming president. But I tried not to dwell on it. A few days after the inauguration ceremony for the new president, I finished my morning work and stood up to take a lunch break. Just then, President Wilson walked into the sales department with loud footsteps. He glared sharply at the subordinates. "Are you all working properly? You're employed by me, so there's no time for breaks. Get out there and make some sales," he suddenly yelled, causing the subordinates to shrink back. Here we go again. Since becoming the second president, President Wilson had started to behave tyrannically. If we took a break, he'd yell, "Don't slack off." And even if we were working, he'd shout, "Do your job, you slacker," with no justification. As vice president, he was not very noticeable, but his drastic change in behavior shocked and scared the employees. Unable to resist, the subordinates put away their lunches and resumed work. I made eye contact with President Wilson and said goodbye before leaving the department. President Wilson stopped me. "Where are you going?" he asked aggressively, but I remained calm. "I'm taking my lunch break. It's already past noon." President Wilson's face suddenly turned sour, and he yelled at me. "Did you hear what I said? I told you there's no time for breaks. Skip lunch and get back to work." Such an unreasonable demand from the president made me respond. "But President Wilson, if we don't take breaks, our work efficiency will suffer. I understand that you're very dedicated to your work, but I don't think it's right to force that on the employees. I've always been the type to speak my mind. If something was unfair, I would argue against it, no matter who it was." The founding president liked this about me, but it seemed President Wilson did not. "You've got some nerve. You'll regret defying me," With that, President Wilson stomped off loudly. The next day, while I was working in my department, I was suddenly called to the president's office by President Wilson. Grinning, President Wilson informed me, "You're demoted from manager to assistant manager. It was a mistake to defy me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What? Why? I haven't done anything wrong. I immediately demanded an explanation, to which President Wilson responded with apparent satisfaction. "I just told you. It's because you defied me, that's all. Now get back to work." President Wilson waved his hand dismissively. Demoted for such a personal reason, I wanted to argue further, but President Wilson glared at me before I could speak. No matter what I said, he'd just send me away or demote me again. I decided to return to my department quietly. A few days later, as I was walking down the hallway to go out on a sales call, I heard shouting from a corner. I observed from a distance. President Wilson was the one yelling. He was shouting at a young male employee without any regard. Scolding someone in the hallway, I thought, feeling uncomfortable, and checked the face of the employee being yelled at. It was Will Brown, a member of the sales department and one of my subordinates. "President Wilson, what's the matter with Will?" I hurriedly stepped between them, and President Wilson turned to me with an annoyed expression. "I'm reprimanding this useless employee. He angered a client." Will shook his head rapidly. "That's not true. I don't know anything about it." I couldn't grasp the situation, so I asked both of them for details. Apparently, someone sent an offensive email to a client yesterday, which made them angry and led to the cancellation of a contract. The email was filled with vulgar language and insults, and it was sent from Will's computer. "They found the email in your sent history, and the security camera shows you using the computer at that time. You're definitely the culprit." "I really don't know anything about it. The email was sent after work hours, right? I wasn't working late that day. I was at home." I was stuck between the two, feeling confused. If their stories didn't match, it meant one of them was lying. But Will is serious and not the type to lie, especially not to send such insulting emails. So the one lying must be President Wilson. "President Wilson, please calm down. Since this happened just yesterday, a proper investigation hasn't been done yet, right? Let's have it properly investigated first." When I suggested this, President Wilson turned red with anger. "Are you saying I'm lying? I verified it myself and determined it was Will. There's no need to report this to the executives." His outrageous statement left me wide-eyed. This man was treating Will as the culprit, based solely on his own judgment. It's too early to decide he's the culprit. Let's hear his side of the story and investigate before making a judgment. Suddenly, President Wilson grabbed me by the collar and started pressuring me. "You better watch yourself. Do you know who I am? I'm the second president. What I say goes." President Wilson roughly released my collar and stormed off. In the end, Will was fired from the company. I was also demoted back to supervisor for defying President Wilson. Whether Will was really the culprit remained unknown. What I did learn was that President Wilson punished anyone he didn't like. I was devastated that such a terrible person had become president. A month later, President Wilson called me to his office again. I entered to find him sitting with a serious expression, surrounded by several executives. As I braced myself for what was to come, President Wilson got straight to the point with a stern face. "You're fired, effective next month." I was so shocked, my eyes nearly popped out. Every time I was called in, I braced myself, but it was still shocking when it actually happened. I decided to ask for the reason. "You embezzled the company's money." "There's no need to deny it. We have proof. The petty cash was withdrawn during your overtime hours." I was too stunned to understand President Wilson's words. According to him, the petty cash was being withdrawn late at night while I was working overtime. It seems there's footage of me on the security cameras, but I have no recollection of it. "Wait a minute, embezzlement. I'm in the sales department, not accounting. That's impossible." I desperately protested, but President Wilson wouldn't listen. You must have threatened the accounting staff to steal cash and keep them quiet. Apparently, you've been embezzling for years. I couldn't help but shout, "What?" The embezzlement had apparently been going on for years, amounting to millions of dollars. If true, this was a huge issue. Of course, I denied it and suggested a proper investigation. President Wilson shook his head in exasperation. It's useless to deny it. I personally verified it was you, Mike. This time, I had the executives investigate, and the accounting staff testified that you threatened them. I couldn't understand what was happening. I had no memory of any wrongdoing, yet they claimed to have solid evidence and testimony. I looked to the executives for help, but they avoided my gaze with apologetic expressions. Their faces reminded me of something crucial. Everyone in the company was afraid of President Wilson. Since demoting me, he seemed to have enjoyed punishing any employee he disliked. His behavior escalated, leading to sudden firings for flimsy reasons, like in Will's case, leaving even the executives powerless. If he instructed the executives and accounting staff to lie, they would comply out of fear. Now, President Wilson could fire employees at will with lies. I suddenly grew to hate Sorif Corporation. When I told President Wilson I would accept the termination, his stern face turned into a wide smile. Oh really? That's too bad. This company's getting famous, so we wanted to avoid involving the police and handle this quietly. It's a real shame to lose such a talented person like you. He probably never intended to involve the police. It was all a lie to get rid of me. I don't want anything to do with this company anymore. Resolving to quit, I said, "It really is a pity. Well, take care," and quickly left the president's office with a smile. After packing my things, I left the company, watched by my bewildered subordinates. A month after my official resignation, I was relaxing at home when my phone rang. Seeing the number, I realized it was from my old workplace, Sorif Corporation. With a sense of recognition, I answered the call without hesitation. It was President Wilson. "You, how dare you? Is this your revenge? What kind of prank is this?" President Wilson was furious. "What are you talking about? I haven't done anything," I replied calmly, which made President Wilson shout even more. "Don't play dumb. You started your own company and stole clients from mine. Give them back immediately," he growled angrily. The truth was, right after leaving Sorif Corporation, I started my own trading company in the same industry. After being fired by President Wilson, I immediately began preparations to start my own business. That said, all that was left was the paperwork. Since I started handling various products in the sales department, I became interested in starting my own trading company. I believed that by working under my own policies, I could contribute more to clients and bring more smiles to their customers. I had decided to go independent a few years ago and had been preparing gradually. Just when I felt the time was right, President Wilson replaced the founding president, and I was fired. The timing was perfect. After using up my paid leave and officially resigning, I started my own company the next day. I reached out to friends and former subordinates who had been unfairly fired by President Wilson, and many people joined me. It was still a small company, but it was more than enough for us. We immediately began visiting various clients. Our targets were all clients of Sorif Corporation. We set up meetings with these clients, using our sales skills to deliver perfect presentations, emphasizing high quality at affordable prices. Many of these clients already knew me from my time at Sorif Corporation. Thanks to that, they trusted me and quickly switched from Sorif Corporation to my company, believing in the quality of my products. As we repeated this process, the number of clients steadily increased, and within a month, we managed to take over more than half of Sorif Corporation's clients. Because of you, the company is in serious trouble. Since firing you, our performance has plummeted, and we're in the red. On top of that, We're on the brink of bankruptcy because you took more than half our clients. What are you going to do about it? Apparently, the company's performance had already started declining the day after I left. President Wilson assumed it would recover eventually, but it never did. It was likely because I was securing clients daily, so when I left, the number of new clients dropped significantly. On top of that, President Wilson probably continued firing employees he didn't like. The reduced staff led to lower efficiency, and remaining employees were overburdened, leading to less effective work and lower morale due to fatigue. Losing a talented person like me is the reason for that. It's your fault for firing me. By the way, I just offered better terms than Sorry Corporation to the clients. There's nothing to give back. President Wilson ground his teeth in frustration. Also, I was fired for embezzlement. But I discovered the real culprit. The one who was truly embezzling was you, President Wilson. When I calmly questioned him, President Wilson responded with a shocked, "What?" Until recently, I couldn't accept that I was fired for embezzlement. I asked some of my former subordinates at Sorry Corporation, and one of them, Will, declared, President Wilson is the real culprit. Will, who had been fired by President Wilson, was one of the first to ask to join my new company, and he's been working hard ever since. When I asked Will about the situation, he explained that he had originally worked as a security guard at Sorry Corporation and had maintained connections with the security staff after joining the company. One day, one of the security guards gave him some surveillance camera footage. This footage captured all of President Wilson's misdeeds, including the moment of embezzlement. Apparently, President Wilson had been secretly committing numerous misdeeds, and after becoming the second president, he threatened the security staff to delete all previous surveillance footage to destroy evidence. Gaining confidence from this, President Wilson continued his misconduct openly, including persistent harassment of female employees, excessive bullying and verbal abuse of staff, embezzlement, and property damage when frustrated. Each time, he would threaten the security staff to delete the footage in front of him. More shockingly, all the scandals pinned on employees he disliked were actually committed by President Wilson. The offensive email to a client that led to Will's dismissal was also President Wilson's doing. Why he went to such lengths to frame others is unclear, but it likely served as a convenient excuse to fire them. The security staff had been aware of this. After being initially threatened to delete footage, a suspicious guard began making copies of the data. As expected, President Wilson continued his threats, so the guard pretended to delete the data but kept the copies safe. This copied data was then given to Will, who had been fired, with the trust to expose the truth. Upon hearing this, I was convinced that the data would serve as solid evidence. Will had been too afraid to report it and had only kept it safe until now. However, when I encouraged Will by saying, "Let's get back at President Wilson," he quickly became motivated and decided to join me in exposing him. When I finished explaining, President Wilson fell silent, but I could see him trembling with fear. "What are you planning to do? Reporting this won't benefit you at all," he asked, his voice shaking. I responded without hesitation. "It will benefit me. I can free the employees who have suffered under you, and personally, I will feel satisfied bringing you down." When I stated this clearly, President Wilson started to panic. "Calm down, Mike. Let's talk. What do you want? Can I buy the footage from you? I'll pay any amount." He tried to compose himself and made an offer, taking deep breaths. Being a president, he seemed to have plenty of money. Or maybe it was simply because he had embezzled it. Is that money also embezzled from the company? It was over $1 million, wasn't it? No matter how much you consider it your company, that money belongs to the company, making it a clear case of embezzlement. When I explained this, President Wilson was left speechless. It seemed I had hit the mark. How many misdeeds would it take to satisfy him? I then told him that the surveillance footage was not the only evidence we had. Actually, I had been secretly recording President Wilson's abusive language for some time. When I decided to start my own company and leave, I planned to report it to the founding president. After all, he had the right to know how his company, which he had built, was being mismanaged by his son. President Wilson must have reported things favorably to the founding president. Though the truth might shock him, the founding president was the only one who could stop President Wilson. "Wait, we can talk this out. Don't report it to the police or my father, especially not to my father," President Wilson pleaded desperately. The founding president was usually kind but terrifying when angry. His stern demeanor made it easy to mistake him for someone from the underworld. President Wilson had lied to his father to become the second president and had been doing as he pleased ever since. I almost admired his daring behavior. It's your own fault, isn't it? If you hadn't used underhanded tactics to fire the vice president, this wouldn't have happened. You picked a fight with the founding president, so take responsibility and face the consequences. President Wilson began to show clear signs of panic. If I had realized earlier that the founding president was President Wilson's weakness, I might not have been fired. But I have no regrets about the current situation. I was able to establish my company quickly, and now I have President Wilson cornered. I decided to add more pressure on President Wilson. Actually, the audio recordings aren't just mine. I also have recordings from my former subordinates and other employees still working at Sorif Corporation. President Wilson let out a pitiful "what?" with the help of Will and my other former subordinates now working at my company. I contacted current employees at Sorif Corporation and asked for information. Several employees came forward, saying they had recorded audio data just in case. The recordings included verbal abuse, excessive insults, problematic remarks to female employees, and more. When I listened to them for verification, I was left speechless with disbelief. When I asked for the audio data to discipline President Wilson, the employees gladly sent it to me. I also contacted security guards, accounting staff, and executives who testified about being threatened by President Wilson and recorded their statements. They were more than willing to help when I promised to remove President Wilson from his position. It was clear everyone was dissatisfied with President Wilson and wanted to do something about it. This proved that President Wilson had no allies left. When I declared that I would report this evidence to the founding president and the police, President Wilson began to cry and apologize. "I was wrong. I'm really sorry. I got arrogant after becoming president. I wanted to be as cool as my father." He's trying to sound noble, but he went way too far. How many people were hurt by President Wilson's actions? He needed to reflect deeply on what he had done. I simply told him, "Be prepared," and abruptly hung up the phone. For a while, President Wilson kept calling, but I ignored him completely. Eventually, he gave up and never called again. The next day, I reported the situation to the founding president, who was recuperating at home. I thought it might be too harsh for him in his condition, but my worries were unnecessary. "What is that fool doing? He's disowned," he shouted in anger, then apologized and thanked me. When I asked if it was okay to report this to the police, the founding president agreed without hesitation and urged me to make sure President Wilson faced the consequences. That same day, I submitted the evidence to the police and filed the charges. A few days later, President Wilson was arrested for embezzlement and other related crimes. Just between you and me, after our phone call, President Wilson disappeared from the company and hid out in a distant hotel. He must have been terrified of facing his father's anger and being arrested. But the police were relentless. After uncovering various details from interviews with employees, they quickly issued an arrest warrant. They then launched a thorough search for the missing President Wilson. It didn't take long to corner him, and he eventually surrendered. Naturally, the incident was widely reported on television, leading to lawsuits from clients for damages and compensation claims from former employees. Sorif Corporation quickly went bankrupt. President Wilson is going to spend some time in prison, and by the time he's released, he'll probably have nothing left but debt. The thought of him struggling to make ends meet in a rundown apartment was quite amusing. Afterward, I worked even harder to boost my company's sales. Our good reputation continued to grow, and we quickly became a mid-sized enterprise. The remaining clients of Sorif Corporation heard the rumors and switched to my company. As a result, sales increased further, and we had to significantly expand our workforce. Most of the new hires were former Sorif Corporation employees. Without me having to reach out, many of them actively sought to rejoin me. My former subordinate said, "Everyone came because you're the president, Mike." And I felt genuinely happy for the first time in a long while. To support my former employees, I must continue to grow the company. I won't be satisfied with the current state. The next goal is to become a major corporation. With this determination, I rushed outside to join the sales efforts myself,